The story starts in the kingdom of Centria, a place where a saint with incredible power is born, but things aren't great for everyone. This girl is actually known as the useless and incompetent one in the whole country, which is pretty ironic since she's supposed to be the evil warding saint. She's just standing there thinking about her reputation, and this guy shows up and picks her up like it's nothing. She's looking pretty flustered while he just smiles, then she makes a big choice. She decides right then that she's done being the useless witch everyone talks about, so the scene moves to a busy town square. People are just going about their day until something goes wrong. People start losing it, yelling for a stretcher and telling someone to get a hold of the temple as everyone starts crowding around to see the mess. This girl asks what happened, and a guy by a wrecked carriage tells her the horse went wild. He says a bunch of people walking by got caught in the crash, but a new person steps onto the scene. She tells everyone not to worry. Helena and Angelina walk through the town with everyone feeling relieved because they know they have a saint nearby, and a young guy rushes up to greet them. Helena introduces herself as the saint sent from the temple and asks to see the people who are hurt the worst. So they get led over to a man sitting by the wreckage with a shredded arm. It looks pretty bad, people are worried he won't make it if the bleeding doesn't stop soon, but Helena doesn't hesitate. She kneels down and reaches toward the guy's bloody arm, just taking a second to focus everything she's got on the injury. She calls out a healing spell, and a massive circle of light erupts around both of them. Right before everyone's eyes, the deep gash on the man's arm starts to close up, and the whole crowd watching just loses it. They start cheering at the top of their lungs, while the guy stares at his arm in total disbelief. He yells out that his wound is actually gone and he's completely healed, which leads him to thank the lady saint over and over. Helena just gives him a warm smile, happy she could help. The crowd is already in awe, with one guy thinking to himself that Lady Helena is a total angel. Just like all the rumors said, meanwhile Angelina ignores the chatter and opens up her medical kit to get some supplies ready for the people who are still hurt. But one of the injured guys looks at her and demands she hurry up and heal him since she's a saint too. Angelina is caught off guard by the pressure and grips her dress as she tries to explain that she actually can't heal people using the usual power of a saint. The man gets annoyed and starts complaining that she's a saint who's completely useless, which makes Angelina look pretty shaken. She still tries to help and tells him she can treat his wounds with medicine instead, but the guy just snaps at her and asks if she's kidding him. The crowd turns on her and the man yells that if she won't use magic, he'll just go to Helena, telling Angelina she's in the way and needs to get lost. She just sinks to the ground, feeling the weight of their words, until Helena finally steps in and tells everyone to chill out, reminding them that even if she doesn't seem like much, Angelina is still the saint. She adds that Angelina is just lacking in a lot of areas, but tells them she isn't trying to cause any trouble. Helena gives a little smile and tells Angelina to just go home, saying she'll handle everything herself. And Angelina doesn't say a word, she just grabs her bag and starts walking away while the villagers watch her go. As she leaves, the people there start whispering to each other, telling everyone to look at her, and they start talking trash about her black hair, saying she looks way more like a witch than any kind of saint. Angelina hears them talking about her wicked purple eyes too, and she can't help but look back for a second. She looks pretty hurt by everything they're saying, but she keeps moving, just walking down the empty street alone, trying to put some distance between her and the crowd. She passes by a park where kids are running around playing with a ball, totally oblivious to her, and she just keeps thinking about them calling her a witch, but she isn't going to let it get to her. She grips the handle of her medical kit as hard as she can, telling herself that she definitely has power too. Angelina thinks about how her power isn't like Helena's. It's not some healing magic that can fix people, and it's not a protective barrier like the one Queen Leonora uses to keep everyone safe. She knows exactly what she's capable of. It's a specific power used only for warding off evil things, letting her sense where evil is hiding so she can take out the demons that try to hurt people. Suddenly, she feels a monster nearby while hanging out near the country's barrier, so she stands her ground, reminding herself that she's Angelina and she's doing her job as a saint the right way. A massive blast of energy slams down, wrecking whatever was out there. The shockwave sends a flock of birds scattering into the air while Angelina just watches from by the fountain, dusting off her hands and saying she's finally all done with that mess. She just stands there looking calm, totally unfazed by what she did. Angelina looks over the smoking remains of the monster she just trashed, thinking that she's just doing her job, but there's a catch because nobody even knows she's doing it. In this place, saints like her are born all the time, and that's the only reason everyone stays safe. She watches the kids playing near the fountain and realizes the people in this kingdom have no clue how scary monsters are, so while other countries are getting torn apart by beasts, the folks here aren't worried at all. They won't actually be afraid until it's too late. As she looks back at the palace, she wonders if anyone will ever truly understand the work she puts in. She's just standing there when someone suddenly screams her name, catching her off guard. A guy is right there in the hall, immediately starting to mouth off and calling her a total waste of space. Angelina just asks him what he wants, which clearly annoys Graham Beardsley. He's the son of an earl and also her fiancé. He tells her that as the guy she's supposed to marry, he's got every right to put her in her place. Graham keeps going, accusing her of ditching her duties and making Helena do all the heavy lifting. He asks if she even has any shame. Angelina tries to defend herself, saying she only stayed back because people told her she wasn't needed, and she's pretty sure Helena knows that too. But Helena just acts all innocent, telling Graham it's honestly crazy how Angelina would just ditch an injured person. She says that kind of attitude is just totally wrong, and Angelina can't believe what she's hearing. She thinks Helena should look in a mirror since she was the one egging everyone on, and while she's processing that, Graham starts losing it. He yells that he's done and refuses to be stuck in an engagement with a woman like her, especially since he only agreed to it because the state forced the deal to keep the Saints' power around. Angelina just stands there in the shadows while she wonders why she even has to put up with being talked down to this much. It's starting to get to her as she just stands there gritting her teeth. She's clearly reaching her breaking point, right when Graham makes a huge scene, shouting to the whole room that he's finally made his decision. He doesn't even hesitate before pointing a finger right at her face and yelling that the engagement is officially over. He looks like he's actually happy about it and tells her he could never live with a witch like her anyway. He says he's going to be with Helena from now on, looking completely full of himself. Angelina thinks about how she only put up with the abuse because she felt a duty to protect the kingdom. But she's finally reached her limit, and she tells Graham straight to his face that she accepts the breakup. She even throws some shade, saying she hopes they're happy if they can even manage that, which leaves Graham and Helena completely speechless. They just stand there looking shocked because they didn't expect her to just walk away. So Angelina starts heading down the hall while they're still yelling for her to wait. She doesn't even look back as she gets to her room and slams the door shut, finally alone and away from all those people. She starts thinking about why she even stayed in this country and dealt with all the garbage for 15 years. It turns out it was all because of a promise she made to her grandmother, who used to be the previous saint of warding. Her grandmother was her mentor and the only person who actually cared about her or taught her anything. She remembers the way her grandmother used to call her Anju while patting her head, and she thinks back to sitting on her lap while being told what a good girl she was. Her grandmother's last wish was for her to protect the country as the next saint. Angelina thinks back to those warm memories of her grandmother, but then reality hits that she's really gone. She sits alone by the big doors, realizing there isn't a single person left in this place worth dying for, so she decides she can't be a saint in this country anymore. She even apologizes to her grandmother because she knows she's breaking the promise they made to protect this land. Moving on, she starts packing her things into a suitcase. She's officially done and leaving the country. She walks away from the castle under the full moon, saying goodbye to her old life and deciding to just be herself. Later on, she makes it to a crossroads and stops at the signs, wondering which direction she should even go. As she's standing there, something nearby catches her attention, and she spots a bunch of bright flowers growing right next to a stone pillar. She thinks they look super cute, so she walks over to get a better look and wonders what they're called. Looking at the signpost, Angelina makes up her mind and decides she's going to head for the kingdom of Robardia. Her shoe hits the ground, snapping a dry twig as she starts her journey through the wilderness. She's walking through the deep forest because she honestly feels like people are way scarier than any monsters. So she figures that since bandits and kidnappers are always hanging out on the main roads, she's better off staying hidden. Moving on, she keeps pushing through the thick grass, but some rustling noises in the bushes nearby make her stop. She locks in and focuses, sensing that she's definitely not alone out here in the woods. She thinks about how life has a funny way of making the devil show up right when you talk about it. And just then, a massive, winged beast slams down right in front of her, completely blocking her path and making the earth shake. The creature lets out a hiss, and Angelina realizes she's just stumbled right into a whole swarm of wyverns. She looks around and notes that there are way too many of them, just as one of the monsters lunges for her from behind. Angelina looks back over her shoulder, her eyes wide as she sees the monster closing in. She keeps her cool though, telling herself she'll just handle these things the same way she did earlier today. But before she can even move, a guy's voice yells out for her to watch out. And then everything happens so fast she barely has time to react before a hand reaches out and grabs her. The light-haired guy swoops in, pulling her close as he swings his sword to drive the wyvern back. She just stays there in his arms, completely confused about what's going on or who this guy even is. He looks down at her and asks if she's hurt, but she just tells him she's okay and asks for his name. While he holds her, his squad moves in and starts hacking away at the monsters nearby, making one of the soldiers yell out to the guy as captain. which is when Angelina realizes she's been saved by someone important. She watches them work and can't believe how these guys are actually holding their own against such high-level beasts. Angelina watches them fight and realizes these guys definitely aren't from her kingdom, making her wonder who they actually are as they keep tearing through the monsters like it's nothing. The captain's got this super focused look while blood splatters across his face. The last wyvern finally goes down hard, hitting the dirt with a loud thud. The whole squad stands around the dead beast to make sure the fight is finished. Angelina just sits on the ground, completely blown away by what she just saw. The captain apologizes for the bloody scene, but she tells him it's totally fine and she's okay. He introduces his group as the Anti-Magic Beast Special Task Force from the Robaldia Kingdom, and then he looks her right in the eyes and says he's there to find an evil warding saint to help his country. Angelina just stares back at him, completely shocked because that's exactly who she is. The squad sets up a full camp in the middle of the woods. Angelina realizes she's actually leaving the Centria Kingdom behind for good, and it really sinks in that she's Angelina Sawa, the evil warding saint, starting a brand new journey. She grips the table tight. From here on out, things are changing, but first she has to deal with being taken in for questioning by these guys. A soldier named Furs walks into the tent to find the captain and reports that the team is done clearing out and processing all the dead monsters. The captain nods along, telling Vice Captain Furs he did a good job and orders him to let the squad get some rest while staying alert, which Furs acknowledges before leaving. The captain turns his focus back to Angelina, making her heart race as he gets ready to talk. The captain introduces his squad as the Anti-Monster Special Task Force from the Rissold Robaldia Kingdom, and with a dead serious look on his face, he lets her know his name is Gilberto. Gilberto asks her who she is, so she nervously tells him her name is Angelina, but he doesn't seem convinced, asking why she's wandering a forest full of monsters all alone without any weapon. He gives her a sharp look and asks if she's really just a traveler like she says. Angelina panics a bit, insisting she's just a traveler who is going to get supplies later, even though she has no idea how to use a sword. She mentions she just came from the Centria Kingdom, which makes Gilberto's expression turn cold. The whole tent goes dead silent as the soldiers exchange looks and Angelina just sits there. She can feel the vibe in the room shift instantly and wonders why things got so tense all of a sudden. Gilberto rubs his neck and finally admits they're actually having some serious problems with Centria right now. Gilberto explains they've been stuck waiting in the forest for 2 whole months because they weren't allowed, and Angelina is completely floored hearing they've been out there that long, and Gilberto clears his throat, finally getting to the point. He tells her they actually came to find the Saint of Warding and shows her the official request. He says they need the saint to lend her protection powers to their nation because things are getting dangerous. He looks her right in the eye and drops the real news. He says there are signs that a great monster migration is coming, which makes Angelina completely freak out. She's heard the rumors about how bad it gets and can't believe it's actually happening again, especially since the kingdom of Rissold Robaldia is literally known as the kingdom of magical beasts. It's a pretty wild place because the entire country is like a giant swamp that supplies an insane amount of magic power. It's basically a beacon, and since it sits right on top of a massive magic pool, it constantly draws in monsters from all over. This leads to the Great Migration, where magic creatures swarm the country just to reach that energy source. It's a total nightmare scenario. The last time this happened 2 years ago, it was a disaster. Countless soldiers lost their lives trying to hold back the swarm, leaving everyone on edge. Gilberto notes that these monster migrations used to only happen once every few decades, but he explains the gaps dropped to 10 years, then 4, and now it's only been 2. The timing is getting way shorter. Angelina sits there quietly, processing the numbers and trying to figure out why the pattern changed. She thinks to herself that this might actually be an expansion phase. Angelina jumps a bit when she realizes she said that out loud, while Gilberto looks over, clearly surprised by her insight. Gilberto asks her to explain, but Angelina panics and waves her hands around, insisting it's totally nothing. Gilberto doesn't look convinced and gets a really serious look on his face. Staring her down, he tells her he has one more question and asks what she really knows about the warding saintess, making her freeze up. He mentions how the Centauria Kingdom hasn't had a single monster attack since the day it was founded, and he asks if that's really the power of the saintess who destroys evil. Angelina just stays quiet, looking pretty stressed out. Gilberto leans over the table and admits they actually tried to get a saint sent over 2 years ago, but he says they were flat out rejected because some selfish saint supposedly refused to leave her fiancé's side. Angelina looks totally stunned by the story. Realizing how much they've been lying, Gilberto continues, mentioning a telegram that just arrived with a specific note to find a girl with black hair and purple eyes and send her back. He looks straight at her and calls her by name, identifying her as that exact girl, and then he asks point-blank if she is actually the real saint of warding. Angelina looks down, finally hitting her breaking point with all the nonsense, and sitting there in the middle of the tent, she says she is completely sick of everything to do with Centria. She realizes they trashed her name just to lower her worth, all because they want to hog her power and drag her back home. She clenches her fist tight, wondering what those people even take her for. Angelina sits there thinking that if she admits she's the saint of warding right now, they'll just force her back to Centria. She doesn't want anything to do with those people ever again, so she knows she has to keep her identity a total secret. She puts on a bright smile and laughs, telling Gilberto there's no way she's a saint and that she's really just a girl named Angelina. Gilberto doesn't say a word, he just crosses his arms and stares her down with a look that says he isn't convinced yet. To back up her story, Angelina points to a kit on the table and explains she used it to change her hair and eye colors. She holds up a small bottle, calling it a basic color-changing potion that everyone buys as a souvenir back home. Gilberto takes the bottle to inspect it and asks one more time if she's truly not the saint. She just looks away and tells him no. Then she turns back to him and says that the Saint of Warding is actually just an incompetent, useless villain. She grabs her bag and makes it clear she isn't the kind of person he's expecting her to be. Gilberto is left standing there looking completely shocked while she starts explaining what her real worth is. Angelina has this look on her face like she's finally at peace with herself. She thinks that as long as she knows the truth, that's all that really matters. She puts on a fake cheerful act and tells the guys there's nothing more a simple traveler like her can do here. She grabs her suitcase and tries to make a quick exit, but Gilberto isn't letting her go that easily. He reaches out and grabs her arm, telling her to wait. He pulls her to a stop, looking way more worried than he was before, while Angelina just stands there wondering why he's blocking her path. She's completely caught off guard by the sudden move and just looks at him like she has no clue what's going on. Gilberto looks pretty stressed out as he tells her to hold on for a second, because he points out that the forest is packed with monsters and asks if she's seriously planning to sleep outside. Furs jumps in too, yelling about how that's way too dangerous for her to do alone. Furs gives her a friendly smile and invites her to stay with their unit for the night, explaining that the captain's tent is the safest spot in the area. Gilberto backs him up and tells her it's fine, promising he won't actually be in the tent with her. He'll stay outside and pull guard duty all night so she can rest. Angelina starts waving her hands around like crazy, telling them there's no way she can accept that. She keeps saying no, feeling like she'd be way too much of a burden on them. Gilberto points out that it's freezing and the woods are full of monsters, so he doesn't mind staying out, but Angelina yells that she definitely minds him doing that. She stammers for a second trying to find a workaround, then suddenly comes up with a plan that might actually work. She looks right at him and suggests they just share the tent, asking him what he thinks about the idea. The two of them just stand there in total silence for a minute while the suggestion sinks in. Moving on, it's late at night, and their tent is the only thing lit up in the middle of the dark forest. Inside, a small lantern flickers on the table, keeping the space quiet and dim. Gilberto looks pretty stressed and won't even look her way, so Angelina speaks up to try and break the awkward silence. She apologizes from behind a curtain divider, explaining she just suggested it as a reflex. Gilberto tells her not to worry about it. She lays her head down and says his name quietly, just making sure she remembered it correctly. Gilberto asks if she's going to sleep and says he'll stay up to keep watch, honestly admitting he's not comfortable sleeping that close to a girl anyway. Angelina gets settled in and tells him she doesn't mind the setup at all. Her special skill is being able to sleep anywhere, making Gilberto look away, wondering if she's just thick-skinned since he really can't figure her out. He decides to ask if her family had any issues with her leaving home. She just looks back at him for a second before quietly mentioning that she doesn't really have any family left. She explains that she's been all alone ever since the grandmother who raised her passed away, which makes her realize out loud that she doesn't have anyone anymore and honestly has nowhere to go back to. Gilberto realizes he stepped in it and quickly apologizes for asking. Angelina looks up and tries to move past the sad talk by asking the captain about his own hometown. She wants to know what the kingdom of Robardia is actually like, and if it's dangerous there lately. Gilberto nods and starts to explain the situation with a pretty serious look on his face. Gilberto describes how the people back home are resilient, and the mountain views under the clear skies are just beautiful, making Angelina look over at him while he shares these memories of his country. As she listens, something suddenly clicks in her head, and she realizes her grandmother used to talk about Robaldia all the time, always saying how the history and culture there were totally fascinating. Gilberto gives a rare smile and simply says he loves his home, and that's the whole reason he wants to protect it so badly. His words stick with her as she sits there silently, thinking about what it's like to actually love something enough to want to protect it. She thinks about people and places worth fighting for and wonders if she'll ever have that. She clutches her blanket tight, feeling like she has nothing and nobody, and knows that protecting things from evil requires the power of a real saint, something she's still unsure about as she pulls the covers up to her face, leaving Gilberto alone with his thoughts. The sun goes down and the moon hangs over the campsite. Everything is quiet as morning rolls around and the birds start chirping, while someone calls out a quick good morning. The soldiers get busy at the site as word comes in that the Robaldia kingdom wants everyone back home immediately. Gilberto sits down with Angelina and tells her he was up all night thinking about the situation. He explains that because of the saint's reputation and what happened 2 years ago, they're canceling the request, which makes Angelina feel pretty bad about the image the Saint of Warding left behind. So Gilberto asks her what she plans to do next. He offers to take her with them if she happens to be heading in the same direction, but she just stands there for a second looking completely focused on a new goal. Holding onto her luggage, she tells him she spent the night thinking too. She's officially decided to head to the kingdom of Robaldia. She knows deep down that she really does have the power of a saint. She makes a silent promise that she won't be using it for her old country, but only for the things she actually cares about and wants to protect, while Gilberto just watches her. Angelina explains that by going with them, she might finally find a place to belong, but Gilberto warns her that his home is actually a pretty dangerous place. She doesn't back down and tells him she really wants to see the beautiful views he cares about, which leaves Gilberto looking at her like he's actually seeing her for the first time. He says he understands. He reaches out and gently takes her hand, and then addressing her formally as Lady Angelina, he officially invites her to travel back to his kingdom with him. Gilberto plays it cool, saying keeping people safe is just part of the job, while a flustered Angelina says she's excited to work together. Realizing her full name is way too long and probably annoying to say, she tells him he can use the nickname her grandmother had for her. She turns around as the wind catches her cloak, feeling a sense of freedom, and looks back at him to suggest he just calls her Anju. A fresh start for the girl who finally has a reason to smile like she actually means it. Gilberto stands there completely red in the face. He's clearly not used to girls being that nice to him, and just as he's lost in the moment, a hand taps him on the shoulder as a voice calls out to him. Gilberto snaps at Furs for sneaking up on him, but Furs just smiles, saying things are getting dangerous in more ways than one, and they'll need to watch their backs. Furs gives him a look and tells the captain specifically not to try anything, which only makes Gilberto sweat and blush even harder as Anju just smiles back at them, happily agreeing to get the journey started. Gilberto gets his head back in the game and shouts for everyone to move out. Their goal is the kingdom of Rissled Robaldia, a place known as the Nation of Magical Beasts. The kingdom sits high up in the mountains, a massive fortress built right into the peaks, a place where the ground itself is soaked in a massive pool of mana, making it a hotspot for all kinds of trouble. The group starts their long trek through the dense forest, but they aren't alone. Something is lurking in the trees nearby, and suddenly a massive, toothy monster lunges out from the brush to ambush the squad. Gilberto moves like a blur, drawing his sword and cutting through the monsters before they can even land a hit. He makes it look easy, and while Furs just stands there smiling like it's a walk in the park, Anju is totally frozen with her eyes wide, barely able to process how fast the squad handled those things. The soldiers give the captain props for the clean work, and Anju tries to keep the vibe positive by telling everyone they did a great job, but the reality of the situation is starting to shift. Anju reminds them that they've got her, the Saint of Warding, on their side now, but Gilberto keeps it professional, telling her not to let her guard down as she quickly agrees. Anju calls out to the captain, catching him off guard for a second as he turns back to look at her, and she rushes over to grab his hands, asking if he's hurt or okay after that scrap, which catches Gilberto totally by surprise. Gilberto tells her he's fine and suggests she should probably stay further back for her own safety, but Anju isn't having it. She insists that she wants to be useful to the team. She starts checking him over, telling him to let her know if he gets even a scratch so she can treat the wounds, leaving Gilberto standing there looking pretty confused by all the attention. She places her hands over his, telling him to just watch. A soft light starts to glow as she uses her power, and Gilberto is shocked to feel all his pain just vanish instantly, while Anju turns to the rest of the squad and yells for anyone else who needs healing to come right over. Anju realizes that touching someone's body or even their sword creates the perfect opening to cast spells that nullify monster poison and give the guys resistance to demonic magic without them noticing. She's pretty happy with herself, thinking this is the best way to be useful while keeping her saint identity a secret. The journey starts going really smoothly after that. The squad handles every monster they run into like it's nothing. Anju gathers herbs in the woods, feeling good that no one has figured out who she actually is yet. And as she cooks up a meal for the group, she starts thinking she might be a total genius. She yells out to the guys that dinner is almost ready. Gilberto takes a bite and is completely caught off guard by how good it tastes, saying it's delicious. So he keeps eating and mentions he feels like he's overflowing with power, while Anju secretly prides herself on adding healing magic as the special ingredient. He takes a moment to appreciate the meal, saying it's really warming him up from the inside. One of the soldiers says a feast like this is exactly what they needed for some energy, and Furs adds that having Anju around to help has been a massive help for the whole squad. One of the guys thanks Anju for the food. She just sits there holding her bowl, looking a little stunned by the gratitude. Looking around at the squad enjoying their meal together, she can't help but think about how happy she feels right now. She thinks back to how things were in Centria, where people were always yelling and treating her like she was a burden. Gilberto looks over at her while he eats, noticing how much she's doing for the group. It hits her that the people of Robaldia are actually smiling at her, a huge change from what she's used to, and she decides right then that she wants to do her absolute best. She really wants to find more ways to be useful to everyone. As she sits there hoping she can keep helping them, Marco watches her and thinks to himself that she's just like a saint. Anju totally panics when he says it, waving her hands and insisting she's just a regular girl named Angelina, while Marco apologizes for scaring her. The guy introduces himself as Marco and tells her he was just so impressed by how brave she's been. Anju's still pretty confused by the sudden attention. Then Marco grabs both of her hands and asks if she'd be okay with the two of them spending time together once they finally get back home. Anju is still processing what Marco just asked, repeating the question back to him in total disbelief, because Gilberto suddenly cuts in and calls out Vice Captain Furs, offering himself up as a training partner instead, while reminding everyone that he's the one in charge. As Gilberto drags Marco away from the camp, Anju watches them go and breathes a huge sigh of relief. Later on, Anju heads out with a bucket to get some water from the river. She mentions that she wants to be helpful but knows she should keep her distance when Gilberto calls her name. He looks at her and simply tells her that he's going to go along with her. So they walk down to the water together, and Anju can't believe her eyes. She says the view is just absolutely beautiful. Gilberto looks out over the lake and agrees, mentioning how he's surprised a peaceful place like this even exists around here. Anju starts to lean down to the water's edge, but Gilberto reaches out and tells her to wait for a second. He scoops some up and tastes it himself first, confirming that there isn't any poison and that it's safe for her to use. Anju just stands there completely stunned. She can't believe the captain would go that far just to keep her safe. Gilberto confirms the danger, and Anju asks him if there's really poison in the river water because he explains that in places where venomous beasts live, the poison from their bodies can sometimes leak into the water supply. Anju gets really worried thinking about what might have happened if the water was poisoned, feeling bad about how careless she was being. She looks down and sighs, telling him she feels totally useless, while Gilberto just watches her quietly for a moment before he suddenly reaches out and offers her a bunch of purple flowers he found. Anju asks what they are, and Gilberto lets her know that these flowers actually work as a natural antidote, adding that they grow back in the kingdom of Philanium Robardia too, and they're tough enough to keep blooming even if they get stepped on. As they sit by the water, he looks at her and says the pretty purple color of the flower looks perfect on her. He continues, describing the flowers as gentle, graceful, and resilient, just like how he sees her. Then Gilberto gives her a small smile and tells her that whatever she doesn't know yet, she can just learn as they go. Gilberto looks her right in the eyes and tells her he doesn't think she's useless at all, and he keeps going, saying it doesn't even matter who she used to be back then. Anju just sits there completely stunned. Gilberto tells her they should probably get moving since the rest of the squad is waiting, so Anju clutches those flowers tight against her chest. Her heart is doing flips. She repeats his words in her head, thinking about how he said her past doesn't matter to him, and watching the soldiers nearby, she realizes Gilberto is actually a really kind guy. And the rest of the people from Robardia are pretty great too. Gilberto reaches out to help her up the rocks, but Anju can't help feeling like a total fake for lying to him. She looks at his hand and feels even worse lying to someone this nice just feels wrong, even though she knows he was only trying to make her feel better. She's still worried because at the end of the day, she knows the real truth is something she can't hide forever. The cliffside suddenly gives way under the heavy rain. Anju loses her footing and starts sliding down the rocks while she stares up in total shock. She can't believe the ground just vanished beneath her like that, and Gilberto screams her name as he watches her disappear over the edge. Moving on, Anju is lying face down in the dirt, barely making a sound as she tries to figure out if she can even move. She slowly pushes herself up into a sitting position, looking around and wondering how she ended up down here. She realizes the rain made the ground way too loose, And while she's lucky she didn't break anything, she's still in a tough spot. She looks around the empty area, figuring she needs to find some cover so she can rest when she spots something in the distance. She heads over and finds a small cave to hide from the rain, huddling up and feeling like absolutely nothing is going her way. She stares into the dark, thinking that this proves she really is just useless to everyone. Anju sits with the squad while they eat, thinking about how she's the only one there who needs help, and she grips her dress tight, feeling like she's just a burden to everyone around her. She thinks back to seeing Helena being praised by the villagers, wishing she could actually be of use to someone. She remembers how Helena is always recognized for her work. And moving on, Anju sits alone in the dark cave, feeling like even that tiny bit of happiness is totally out of her reach. She curls up and cries, thinking that being this useless hurts more than anything else, when Gilberto suddenly yells her name from the entrance. She jumps up, shouting back in total shock as she just stares at him, completely stunned that he actually found her. She says his name quietly, and Gilberto looks back with a worried face, telling her he's just glad she's safe. He kneels down to check on her and asks if she's hurt, apologizing for letting go of her during the fall and telling her everything is okay. Gilberto apologizes for making her worry and starts to say how sorry he is, while Anju just whispers his name, looking relieved that he's actually there. He leans in closer, noticing the marks on her face, and asks if she's been crying. Anju completely panics, blushing hard and insisting she's fine, trying to find any excuse for how she looks as she looks away, still blushing and repeating that she's okay. Gilberto kneels down beside her and tells her she doesn't have to force a smile, while Anju just stays quiet and looks to the side, starting to argue but losing her words. He just watches her for a moment with a gentle look on his face, then he says he'll stay just while it's raining. Anju tells him to do whatever he wants, so he offers to look the other way so she can have some space. He mentions how crying can actually help clear your mind sometimes, making Anju look at him, surprised by how kind he's being. He looks out at the storm and tells her that eventually, the rain is going to stop. Rain drips off the leaves as the storm starts to die down. Gilberto tells Anju that no matter how heavy the rain feels, it's always going to stop eventually. He adds that some things only grow because of the rain, looking pretty relaxed while he gives her a small smile. Anju finally lets it all out, crying and smiling at the same time because of what he said. Gilberto mentions that surprisingly, this might actually bring them some luck, just as the sun starts shining over the mountain. Anju cheers and stretches out since the sky is finally open, while Gilberto just notes that it really cleared up. As they start walking, Anju asks what was even up with that sudden storm. Gilberto admits he has no clue, saying sometimes stuff like that just happens. Anju looks up, a bit surprised when he says they should get back to the rest of the squad. Gilberto reaches out his hand and tells Anj to come along with him, so she just stares at his hand for a second, blushing as she realizes he's waiting for her. Then she quickly says yes and takes his hand so they can finally head back together. Anju points off in the wrong direction, asking if they should go that way. Gilberto immediately corrects her, pointing the opposite way and wondering how she's getting lost so fast. One of the soldiers mentions he's just glad the two of them made it back safely as they rejoin the rest of the group. Furs looks over some papers and tells everyone that things are moving along nicely, meaning they should be heading home pretty soon. While Marco and the other guys are laughing and patting Anju on the head like she's one of them, one of the soldiers calls out to the captain, because Gilberto is just standing there with a serious look, thinking to himself about how he still can't manage to read Anju's deal. Furs watches her and mentions that when she acts all happy like that, she really does seem like a totally normal girl, and Marco nods along. Furs keeps thinking that if even the captain can't pick up on anything with his special magic-reading eyes, then maybe she's just an ordinary civilian after all. See, their kingdom usually produces some of the best magic users around, and Gilberto is officially known as the top guy in the whole nation for sensing magic. So if he can't see through her, it means she's either completely normal or has some kind of crazy hidden talent, almost like she really is a saint chosen by God. The group watches her walk away, thinking that even if she's a mystery, she's probably not a bad person. And while they talk, Gilberto stays quiet, thinking back to the very first moment they met. He admits to himself that even back then, he felt like he couldn't just let her go. To him, she seems really strong but also kind of delicate, almost like that Philanium stuff. And so he decides he's going to dig a little deeper into who she actually is. The weeks go by as they keep moving, with wyverns circling way up in the clouds. After a full month of traveling, they finally arrive at the destination, and Gilberto tells Anne she can open her eyes because they're officially standing in his hometown. He gives her a proper welcome to the kingdom of Rizzled Robardia, a massive city full of white buildings and stone towers. And the two of them head toward the giant castle gates to finally start their next chapter. The guards at the main gate stand at strict attention as the group finally enters the city, Everything is official now, and as soon as she sees the view, Angelina's eyes start sparkling with total excitement. She can't help but yell about how amazing it is, looking at the massive stone buildings, and telling Gilberto that the place feels like a real fortress, way beyond anything she ever imagined. Furs starts giving her the grand tour, explaining that the city actually has teleportation circles everywhere that run on mana from the local pools. Angelina thinks that sounds incredibly convenient, but she's mostly just surprised because she never knew mana pools could be used for stuff like that. She's still taking it all in when she tries to run off to explore more, but Gilberto has to grab her cloak to hold her back. He looks at her pretty seriously and asks what she's actually planning to do now that they're here. So he points out she'll need to find an inn if she's staying, and Angelina realizes she's also going to need a job to keep her travel fund safe. Gilberto starts to bring something up, but Furs cuts in to say he already talked to the captain, and then he asks Angelina if she'd want to just work at their barracks instead. She's totally stunned, especially when Furs adds that the gig comes with a room, free meals, and a real salary. Angelina stands there looking completely stunned by the offer. It's a lot to take in, and she has to ask why they're going so far for her when she's just an outsider, but Gilberto tells her it's a given. He brings up their journey together and tells her how much they appreciated her serving them with total sincerity, so he takes her hand and explains they just really want to repay her. It's just how the whole squad feels. Angelina looks up at him with her eyes shining, finally realizing that these people actually saw how hard she worked. She's so touched that she starts getting a bit emotional, so Gilberto asks if she's okay and she has to apologize for being so surprised. She mentions that back in Centria everyone just called her useless, which sends a literal shock through the guys. Gilberto looks furious and asks who the hell would say that, while Furs gives off a scary vibe and asks for a specific name, making Angelina jump. She starts bowing like crazy to change the subject, telling them thank you so much for everything, and decides right then and there to take them up on the offer, officially joining the crew. Angelina stands there with a look of pure determination, telling the guys that she's officially going to be working here right alongside them. The scene shifts over to the headquarters, a massive stone complex built right into the side of the hills. Gilberto leads her through the grand entrance hall and explains that this is their main base of operations for the Anti-Magical Beast Special Task Force. He shows her around the main floor where all the elite mages and magic swordsmen gather. It's a serious crowd of professionals. He goes on to say their job is to handle and take down magical beasts both at home and in other countries, moving out whenever a request comes in. Furs leans in with a smirk to let her know that everything involving their internal business is actually classified info, which catches her off guard. He keeps the finger up and tells her she's got to keep everything she sees here strictly confidential, making her get a little flustered. Moving into the stone corridors, Gilberto sends Furs off to report to the bosses while telling Angelina that her dorm is toward the back of the building. As they walk, he lets her know her main duties are going to be cooking and laundry, so they're heading to the dining hall first to get started. Angelina just looks around the huge place with wide eyes, trying to take everything in. It's a whole new world for her. Angelina stands before huge iron doors, guards watching her every move as she asks what's behind the heavy gate. Gilberto says it's the courtyard, but he seems hesitant, so he decides it's a good time to be honest and tells her he'll show her everything. He explains that just hiding and protecting people isn't the only kindness people need to choose their own way. Angelina starts to ask what he means, then a huge gust of wind hits and she's completely shocked. She can't believe her eyes as the doors open up because it's a literal demon's lair, a massive pit of monsters and dark magic right there. She's shaking, asking why they would ever keep something this scary inside the building, but Gilberto points down, explaining this is where they intercept the big monster migrations first. He adds that if things get too crazy, they open the inner iron doors even further. Gilberto explains these gates link up to magic pools in other lands, and while opening them would scatter the beasts, the soldiers here choose to fight to the death to keep things contained. He makes it clear that this place is a fortress, where everyone puts their lives on the line to hold back demons for the sake of every nation, because that's exactly what the Kingdom of Robaldia stands for. As they look over the edge, he mentions that his own friends and seniors died right here in this pit. Angelina starts thinking back to the Great Migration that happened 2 years ago, a time when she wonders what she was even doing while everyone else was out there struggling. She remembers being a kid, sitting all alone in the dark while everyone else was together. She starts to say something, but Gilberto just tells her it's fine. Being a soldier means accepting that this kind of stuff is just their fate. Then he drops a bombshell, saying the next Great Migration is actually predicted to hit within a year. And Angelina can't believe it's that soon, but suddenly she gets this weird feeling that stops her in her tracks. Angelina's eyes go wide as she gets hit by a sudden, intense feeling that completely stops her in her tracks. She just stands there frozen right at the edge of the dark pit, while Gilberto notices something is wrong and calls her name. A massive, terrifying eye seems to stare back at her from the swirling depths. She starts gasping for air, totally losing it. Everything goes black as she collapses, but Gilberto yells out and catches her before she hits the ground. He holds her close, sounding totally panicked as he begs her to pull herself together and tell him what just happened. Angelina stays completely unresponsive, looking pale as Gilberto keeps shouting her name in the middle of the fortress. Inside her head, she's stuck in the dark, thinking about how it's already starting and wishing it wasn't true. Later on, she finally wakes up in a clinic bed and immediately starts saying how sorry she is for the mess, but Gilberto cuts her off, saying he's the one who should apologize for being so inconsiderate and not expecting her to faint. He tells her the thick magic coming off the pit probably messed with her senses, and says he's just happy she's finally feeling better. Gilberto jokes that she was moving around so much he nearly dropped her, making Angelina stammer that it only happened because he was carrying her like a princess. She realizes she was definitely affected by the magic, explaining that her fainting was actually a rejection response from her body. Angelina explains that since demons and exorcists are total opposites, their powers naturally clash and mess with one another. She says that the moment she touched the magic, she realized the terrifying truth that no human could ever handle that kind of power unless they were literally a god. Looking down at her hands, she tells him that the massive pool of magic in that pit can't be destroyed. She looks pretty depressed and admits she thought she could actually do something about it, but she was just being naive, sitting there on the clinic bed. She suddenly asks Gilberto what he really thinks about the Saint of Warding. Angelina wonders where people even get the idea to believe a saint would actually show up to save them, especially since all those soldiers and their friends are out there risking their lives on that one single hope. Gilberto stares her down and says he wants to know the truth. He gets quiet for a second while his eyes lock onto hers. He finally agrees with her point and admits that she's probably right, but he points out that those soldiers did their job and fulfilled their duty. He says if he were in their shoes, no matter the reason, they'd all end up hating a saint who can't get the job done. Angelina just stands there, completely stunned by how harsh he's being. Her hand grips the bedsheet as she thinks about how heavy his words are. She realizes those guys fought with everything they had, and she looks down, her hair covering her face as she decides that if that's the way things are, then she can't afford to be lazy or half-hearted about this anymore. She looks up with this new look in her eyes, stepping off the bed and onto the floor. She starts to tell him that she has to take action, and standing tall in front of Gilberto, she tells him she's gotta do what she can, especially since that pool of magic is about to burst, and she knows exactly what's coming. Looking at the swirling pit, she says it's expanding and contracting until it finally wakes up, probably in a month. Gilberto looks at her, his voice low as he says Angelina's name, just staring her down while he asks who she really is. But then Furs bursts into the room in a total panic, yelling for the captain because it's a major emergency. The soldier shouts that a message just came in from Centria, and he explains that a massive group of monsters has spawned from magic pools all over. Even breaking through the barrier, they need backup immediately, which leaves Angelina shaken as she realizes everything is happening way too fast. Over in the kingdom of Centria, giant monsters and wyverns are tearing through the city while everyone screams in terror. People are running for their lives, wondering where these things came from, and if they're actually seeing real monsters, and one guy is just completely losing it because he can't believe these things are actually real. The crowd is told to head for the temple, everyone rushing to find some kind of cover before it's too late. Outside the temple, panic is hitting a breaking point as people wonder why Lady Leonora's barrier isn't holding. They thought it was supposed to just wipe out anything evil, but things are only getting worse. Someone in the crowd screams out for the Saint of Warding, but Helena jumps in right away, telling everyone to just stay calm because she's on the scene. Helena steps into the temple hall, where people call her name as she looks out at rows of injured villagers, all of them lying on mats waiting for help, and she immediately starts giving orders, telling them to bring the most hurt people over so she can start healing them. But as she gets to work, she's got a real chip on her shoulder, thinking to herself that with her kind of power, they don't even need a guy like Graham around. She puts her hands over a girl's stomach and lets her magic go to work, but the light is barely doing anything, and Helena starts to freak out when she sees the blood won't stop flowing. She can't understand why her magic isn't fixing it. She practically loses it, clutching her head in total panic while she stares at the wound, wondering what the hell is going on and why it's so bad. With the healing magic completely failing, she starts biting her nails, terrified because she has no idea what she's supposed to do next, until she spots a box of supplies nearby and realizes she might have one last option to try. Helena grabs a vial of holy water and realizes this is exactly what Angelina used to use back when she didn't have any healing magic. She tips the vial over and starts pouring the liquid straight onto the girl's open wound, and suddenly the bleeding starts to slow down as the water purifies the demon energy. Helena lets out a sigh of relief because she finally found something that works. She turns back to the medical kit and decides she's going to go through every single bottle of holy water. They have left pouring 2 bottles at a time, while she tries to convince herself that she's got everything under control. Her ego starts kicking in, and she tells herself she doesn't even need Graham around to pull this off. Sweat is dripping down her face as she swears that as the head saint, she's going to be the one who saves everyone here. But the guy helping her looks at the empty vials and delivers the bad news: they're officially out of holy water. Before she can even process that, a monster crashes through the wall and sends everyone into a total state of panic. People start yelling to block the windows while someone screams at Helena, begging her to tell them what they're supposed to do now. The pressure finally gets to Helena as the villagers crowd around her, begging her to use her saint powers to save them, but she's completely hit her limit. Someone yells for her again, and she just stands there shaking and sweating, totally paralyzed, and then she just snaps. She turns around and starts sprinting away from the scene, leaving the villagers standing there in total shock. The people can't believe what they're seeing. A woman screams Helena's name, while another guy yells at her to stop and tell them where she's going. Helena doesn't look back, she just keeps running while her mind races, desperately wishing that someone would come and save her. Instead, one of the villagers loses it and starts screaming at her to not run away. But then the desperation turns into pure anger as he calls her an incompetent good-for-nothing. Helena's face is a total mess of tears and snot as she realizes everyone finally sees her for what she is. She eventually collapses in the middle of the street, sobbing on the ground while the wyverns continue to circle the city. The scene shifts away from the chaos to a much quieter part of the city where things seem a lot more peaceful. Inside a room somewhere, it's dead silent except for the sound of a single drop of water falling from a leaky faucet. Gilberto is just getting ready in his room when a soldier knocks on the door, reporting an emergency summons. The soldier explains that the council is getting together right now to discuss the situation in Centauria, while Gilberto listens, looking down at his notebook filled with photos of the mountain. He simply says that he's got the message and grabs a silver necklace as he tells the soldier he'll be over there in just a second. The scene shifts over to a large city built right into the side of the mountain. Someone yells for Ange to bring out the next order, and she calls back that she's already on it, carrying a tray full of food. She apologizes for the wait while serving the daily special to a customer who's happy to see the food looks great again. While she works, Anju realizes it's already been 3 weeks since they first arrived in Robardia, and she wonders what happened with that mana pool from before. But then Gilberto walks up and says she's finally looking the part. Anju is totally surprised to see both Captain Gilberto and Vice Captain Furs standing there, but the captain just smiles and says they're ready for lunch. Anju notices how tired the guys look and mentions they seem really busy. But Gilberto just sighs. He tells her they've been stuck in council meetings all morning trying to figure out what to do about the massive monster migration. Meanwhile, Furs is at a table laughing, saying it's weird how peaceful things are today with 0 demon attacks. Anju stands there listening, but she can't help feeling like something is off. And Gilberto's expression goes dark as he reminds her that Centria was exactly this peaceful until everything changed. He explains that ever since the demons showed up, Centria has been falling apart because they don't have a saint to protect them. Things have gotten so bad over there that everyone is just ditching the country to save themselves. And Gilberto points out that since they're neighbors, they can't just pretend this isn't their problem too. Which makes Anju look back at the magic pool, knowing the only reason things are holding together is because she's there. But she's scared because even her power is hitting a limit, and soon this country might end up just like Centria. Gilberto leans on the counter and tells Anju that in the end, the Saint of Warding failed her mission. He adds that she really was as useless as everyone said, which makes Anju look down in silence. Trying to stay professional, Anju tells them she has their order and asks them to go wait at their seat. So the guys start heading out, with Furs telling the group he'll go find a spot for them to sit. Furs hangs back for a second and asks Anju if something is bothering her, which catches her off guard. He mentions that he figures she probably has a lot of thoughts about the monster migration happening, but Anju starts to panic and tries to speak, only for Furs to cut her off and say that's all that matters. He tells her that as long as she can run away without worrying about anything else, he and the captain will be out there on the front lines fighting monsters when the time comes. Anju just stares at him, thinking about how the front lines are the place closest to death. Furs tells Anju she should rest easy because he and the squad are going to protect all the citizens, and he holds her hands while promising to keep her safe too. Anju just blushes and looks at him, thinking about how having someone to protect is what makes a person strong. She realizes that Gilberto probably feels the same way about his duty, and then Furs walks off with his paperwork, telling her he understands her feelings perfectly, leaving Gilberto looking pretty confused. Anju stands in the kitchen alone and remembers being told that she has the power to become strong. She tells herself that she feels the same as the soldiers. She wants to protect all these people too. Clutching her apron, she decides that as the Saint of Warding, she knows she can get this done. She tells herself there's no more time to worry because the monsters are coming soon, so Anju looks up at the birds in the sky and gives a silent thanks to Gilberto for everything. Gilberto and Anju walk along the high walls of the city together. Gilberto thanks her for spending time with him on his first day off in a long time, and Anju says she's just glad he asked her to come along. Standing tall in his uniform, Gilberto mentions he'd been planning to show her around the area outside the city walls regardless, so he tells her she shouldn't hesitate to speak up if there's anywhere specific she wants to go. Anju admits there is a certain spot that's had her curious since she first arrived, pointing out toward the distance. She brings up a specific gate she noticed earlier. Anju notes that unlike every other entrance, this one is standing wide open. She asks if that's normal, and Gilberto confirms it is, explaining that there is actually a big legend about that gate. He tells her the story goes that the whole country will fall if those doors are ever closed, so it stays open 24/7. He also mentions that, for some reason, monsters never even come near that part of the wall. Gilberto adds that there isn't much out there besides some old ruins once used for rituals. Anju's face lights up at the mention of old ruins, and when Gilberto asks if she's interested in seeing them, she gets super excited and says she definitely is. She starts babbling about finding secret plans, or just finding some dreams and adventure out there in the old city remains. Anju points toward the distance and tells Gilberto they should definitely head over to those ruins, and once they get there, she can't help but shout about the massive tree growing right over the site. She stares at the entrance, asking what it is since it looks like the teleport circles back in town, but Gilberto says he has no idea, only that the whole place looks super old. Anju leans in to get a better look at the floor, spotting a faded crest that looks exactly like something her grandmother used to show her. Gilberto asks if something is wrong, but she just smiles and tells him it's nothing, wanting to push further in. They walk out into a wide valley where Gilberto explains this place is known as the Graveyard of Magical Beasts. He points out a bridge over a massive pit, warning her that it's bottomless and anyone who falls is gone for good, but Anju isn't scared at all, saying she really wants to see the ritual ruins on the other side. Gilberto stops and tells Anju they have to turn back here, since the old suspension bridge is way too dangerous for them to cross, but Anju isn't so sure, pointing out that she can actually see some kind of ancient spell cast on the bridge. She starts thinking about how this place and that magic circle might be connected to the Saint of Warding, but she knows she has no proof yet. Suddenly, she spots something and asks what it is, pointing out some purple objects sitting at both ends of the bridge. She walks over to get a closer look at the ground. When she gets near, she realizes exactly what she's looking at: a philanium flower growing right there in the dirt. She crouches down, wondering why a flower would be growing in a place that's mostly just rocks, or if a seed just blew out here by luck. Anju stares at the beautiful purple color. Then it hits her, and she catches her breath as she realizes the truth. She stands up quickly, saying it's impossible, while Gilberto looks on confused and calls out her name to see what's wrong. Anju stands there completely frozen as Gilberto calls out her name. Memories of her grandmother flood back, telling her what a good girl she is and to always look for the color purple whenever she's lost. Her grandmother's voice continues, saying she'll leave that color the same as Anju's eyes all over the world, which makes Anju realize the truth, asking her grandmother in her mind if she had actually visited the kingdom of Robardia before. She thinks about how much her grandmother loved her, and how she must have seen a future where Anju would lose her way. That's why even after she died, she left behind a guidepost like these flowers so her granddaughter wouldn't make mistakes or get lost. Anju looks down with a serious expression, whispering her grandmother's name to herself. She thinks about, for the first time in her life, she's finally found something she actually wants to protect. Clutching her clothes, she wonders if she's really strong enough to fulfill her duty as a saint. Even though she's standing her ground, she admits to herself that she's still got plenty of things she's afraid of. Anju pictures the massive dragon-like demons from her visions, wondering if a beast that could wreck a whole nation is something she can actually beat. Standing there with Gilberto, she wonders if their relationship can ever stay the same as they spend this quiet moment together. She looks at his gentle smile and can't help but wonder if he'd still reach out to her once he finds out the truth about who she really is. But she tells herself she has to see this through to the end, even if she's starting to have some serious doubts about her own path. With tears starting to well up, Anju tries to find her voice, reminding herself that despite her fears, she's the Saint of Warding. She bows her head low, offering a sincere apology to Gilberto while also making sure to thank him for everything he's done. As she stays bowed, Gilberto just stands there looking completely caught off guard by her sudden display of emotion. His eyes widen in total shock as he processes what she just told him, like he wasn't expecting her to say any of that. Before she can even react, Gilberto steps in and pulls her into a tight hug, holding her close while petals drift through the air around them. Anju's face turns bright red as she looks up at him, totally stunned and barely able to whisper his name. Anju stammers as she tries to find her words, but Gilberto just looks at her and says thanks. He explains that he only hugged her because she looked so fragile right then, and Anju just stays quiet. He tells her that even though she's strong, she still looks really vulnerable sometimes. He goes on to admit that before he even knew it, he started thinking about her all the time hearing this. Anju gets a soft look on her face, wondering what this feeling in her heart is. Gilberto looks away, his face getting all red as he deals with his feelings. Anju says his name softly, but Gilberto is lost in thought, wondering why he's just now realizing the truth. It finally clicks for Anju that what she's feeling is actually her falling in love. Gilberto says that since he's always around death, even if he found love, he'd probably just lose it anyway. After a quiet moment with petals drifting by, he tells Anju he wants her to at least take this one thing. Anju stares down at the necklace in her hands, her voice trailing off as she realizes it's a star crystal, a rare piece of light from the sky that's meant to keep away evil spirits and bad luck. Looking at the silver shine, she thinks it looks just like a sharp sword or even exactly like Gilberto's eyes, and then Gilberto tells her he really wants her to take it. Anju just stands there blushing as he admits that this might be the very last time they get to speak like this. He goes on to say that the soldiers from this country have a tradition of giving special gifts to the people they love, putting all their shared memories into the item, along with a promise to make it back home. Anju listens, but then she looks him right in the face and tells him no, she won't accept that kind of goodbye because she's planning on standing right there on the same battlefield as him. And so she calls out his name, looking up at him with a mix of love and serious determination. Anju thinks to herself that she doesn't want him to say those words, but Gilberto says her name anyway and pulls her into a tight hug, promising that he'll survive the fight and come back for her if she'll just wait. But the reality of the situation is harsh because that wish is something that simply can't be granted. And then everything changes in an instant as Anju feels a sudden chill and looks completely shocked because she realizes that the danger has arrived, telling the soldiers standing with her that it's finally here. Down in the courtyard, a dark swirl of energy starts spinning around, and Gilberto senses the shift, looking back over his shoulder as things get crazy. The dark portal rips wide open and starts tearing up the stone floor, and then this massive, terrifying eye opens up right in the middle of the darkness, and black sludge explosions burst into the air as the soldiers draw their swords to face whatever just showed up. One of the soldiers loses it and screams as the intense shockwave from the portal hits him. The light is so blinding he has to shield his eyes, and then a massive scaly claw stomps right into the middle of the courtyard, throwing soldiers back like they're nothing. A huge dragon-like beast towers over the stone walls, while an officer yells for everyone to fall back and get a report out to every unit. Gilberto looks like he's struggling with the pressure of the moment, and Anju says that the nightmare has officially started. She realizes this is a full-blown magic beast migration, all while commanders are yelling for every man to assemble. Word spreads fast that a crazy amount of monsters are pouring out of the mana pool in the central courtyard, and the command goes out for all units to prepare for battle. The situation on the ground is total chaos, as the courtyard gets completely overrun by all kinds of terrifying creatures, from giant ogres to massive snakes, leaving Anju to call out the high-tier threats like Cerberus, basilisks, and even minotaurs that are leading the charge. She sees that it's a massive swarm of nothing but the strongest monsters, and even though she was prepared for this, she just hopes everyone makes it out. One of the soldiers yells for Captain Gilberto and Vice Captain Furs to look. Furs points toward the chaos, while the two of them lead the way out. All the soldiers are scrambling to get into their fighting positions as the courtyard fills up with Anju, who stands there with her hands held tight. She tries to stay positive, telling herself they'll be fine because everyone is strong with those two leading, and she knows she has to do her part too. She takes a solid step forward, decided on doing whatever she can. Gilberto looks completely focused on the fight ahead. Anju catches his eye for a second and then she takes off. While Gilberto stays back to hold the line with his hand on his sword, Anju runs through the stone halls. She can see other soldiers rushing toward the front lines in the distance, but she stays on her path sweating and pushing herself to the limit. She tells herself she's going to take down these monsters just to make sure he stays safe, but Gilberto is already in deep. He says her name quietly, totally unaware that a massive snake monster is right over his shoulder, and just then a soldier screams that the monsters are here. Gilberto's expression goes cold. He knows the real fight is finally hitting them. Gilberto dives straight at the massive snake monster as small winged beasts swarm the air around them. He keeps his eyes locked on the target, looking completely focused on the kill. Furs isn't far behind. He swings his sword with everything he's got to clear a path. With one heavy slash, Gilberto tears through the giant snake and lands firmly on the ground while the two of them stand back to back. Furs teases him for being bold enough to look away during a fight, so Gilberto admits he messed up and thanks him for the save, but Furs has something else on his mind. He mentions that his body feels strangely light all of a sudden. Gilberto notices it too, saying his magic firepower has definitely gone up, and he realizes it's the exact same feeling they had back when they were traveling together, like his magic resistance and power just got a huge boost. Even though he doesn't know why it's happening, he's just glad to have the extra strength for this fight. Furs looks over and tells him there's no reason to worry about Ange either. A girl that tough is going to make it through no matter what, and Gilberto finally lets out a small smile. He agrees with Furs and says hearing that really puts his mind at ease. Gilberto shouts for the squad to keep the pressure on and take down as many monsters as they can while they've got the lead. The guys are pumped, yelling for everyone to keep moving and promising to get the job done, but the monsters aren't backing down as a huge horned beast with an axe leads a whole pack of them into a charge. Small winged monsters start zipping all over the place, forcing the soldiers to swing fast just to keep from getting swarmed by the flying pests. The whole area is turning into a graveyard of broken stone and monster remains as the fight drags on. Furs is in the middle of it all, moving fast and clearing out enemies with some clean sword work. But over on the side, Marco is completely gassed and can barely catch his breath while another monster circles him. Furs spots the opening and yells for Marco to watch out, throwing himself into the path of the dive-bombing beasts, and he ends up taking a nasty hit to the arm. Marco looks like he's about to lose it and starts apologizing for being the reason the vice captain got hurt. But Furs just grits his teeth and tells him it's fine, insisting that Marco needs to worry about himself and get some rest. One of the soldiers yells out to the captain to get his attention. Gilberto looks over, noting that while the fight is intense, they luckily haven't lost anyone yet, but the problem is the monsters just keep coming without stopping. Gilberto can see his troops are starting to get exhausted, and even worse than that is the fact that these demons only get more aggressive once they smell blood. If they don't change something fast, the whole squad is going to be in a lot of trouble. Gilberto barks out orders for all the injured guys to fall back and get treated. He specifically tells Furs to get out of there too, and the guys promise they'll be right back, leaving Gilberto standing there alone, looking pretty stressed as he tries to hold the line. Furs looks back over his shoulder, looking completely shocked by what he's seeing. The guys yell out for their captain, but Gilberto just tells them to forget about him and keep going. He charges straight ahead, insisting he can handle whatever is coming, though he's secretly losing it, thinking there's no way this is actually happening to them right here. He stops dead in his tracks as a massive, drooling beast blocks his path. Gilberto realizes he's staring down a hellhound, and the giant monster lets out a deafening roar that shakes the whole area. Gilberto goes head-to-head with the hellhound, swinging his blade to keep the beast back. But those chains on its legs whip around and snag his boot, locking him to the spot. He realizes he's stuck just as a massive claw comes swinging right for his head, and the monster slams him into the ground with enough force to shatter the rocks around them. Gilberto takes the hit hard. He's coughing up blood and barely hanging on as he collapses onto the dirt, watching his sword fly out of his hand and stick into the ground. He's bleeding out fast, kneeling there as his vision starts to get all blurry and dark. Everything starts fading to black. He can feel himself slipping away, wondering if he's really about to die. Just as he's losing it, he sees Anju in his mind. She looks so calm while everything else is falling apart. He tells himself there's no way he's going out like this, reaching out to grab his sword one last time. Gilberto finds a sudden burst of energy and charges right back at the beast. He yells that there's no way he's letting this happen, and the only thing on his mind is the promise he made to Anju. He tells himself he has to make it back alive, and the hellhound lunges with its jaws wide open, ready to finish him for good. But Gilberto is faster. He puts every last bit of strength into one massive swing of his blade. The monster gets torn apart and hits the dirt, leaving Gilberto leaning on his sword and gasping for air. He barely has a second to breathe before the other soldiers start freaking out, asking what's going on because huge monsters are starting to crawl out of the shadows everywhere. Just then, a massive pillar of light shoots straight up into the sky from the middle of the city. All these creepy, high-level monsters are showing up out of nowhere, and small winged beasts start swarming the air as the whole place descends into total chaos. A creepy little bat-winged monster screeches as it dives through the air, and Gilberto and his squad are completely blindsided by the sudden swarm. The soldiers start losing it, yelling out and asking what's even happening while a massive foot stomps down, making the whole ground shake under the weight. Gilberto drops to one knee in the middle of the ruined city. He's totally stunned, asking himself what on earth is going on. He stands back up and looks around at the silence, wondering for a second if the nightmare is finally over. But he shakes it off. He can feel it's not over yet, and the look on his face says things are about to get way worse. He stares at the massive pillar of light reaching into the clouds, feeling like it's pulling him in towards something huge. Gilberto snaps back into action and starts moving. He yells at his squad to keep their guard up and kill every monster in sight. And without wasting another second, he takes off running to go after the beasts himself. Gilberto is moving fast, sprinting past the ruined stone walls as he tries to reach the source of the light. He's not stopping for anything, and the stress is clearly getting to him. He wonders why any of this is happening, thinking to himself that he's got a really bad feeling about where things are headed. Looking out over the city from her spot in the ruins, Anju watches the monsters swarm in the distance. She's actually happy about it. She says he's finally here and cheers because her plan worked out perfectly. Then she stands right in the center of a massive glowing ritual circle. It's exactly what she expected. She realizes these ruins were built specifically as a defensive barrier for a warding saint like her. She thinks back to that teleportation circle they found earlier. Turns out that's what brought them all the way to these ritual ruins hidden beyond the rift. Anju clasps her hands together and focuses. She knows this circle will keep the saint protected while she uses her magic, so she feels like she can finally go all out. She stands her ground, ready to push her limits even further. She tells herself she's going to do it again, and she starts calling out for even more power. She wants to be the only thing the monsters care about, making it so every demonic creature out there is focused solely on her. A dark smile grows on her face as she prepares the trap. She's totally confident and says she's going to lure every single one of them in. She whispers for them to come get her, and right on cue, a massive hellhound with glowing eyes and drooling jaws snaps at the air, completely driven wild by her presence. Anju opens her arms wide as the light surrounds her, calling out to get the monster's attention and telling them to come her way. She's totally focused on pulling every single one of them toward her spot. Since she's the saint of warding, she knows exactly how these demons think. She starts giving off the dark mana they crave, and it's working perfectly. The hellhounds are completely hooked on the scent, looking totally out of it as they charge in. Just as they get close, she prepares to shut the trap with a barrier. And as the massive glowing circle lights up the sky, she strikes them all down at once. The monsters can't stop their momentum and end up tumbling straight into the dark abyss below. Anju stands at the edge of the cliff and watches as the entire swarm falls into the deep canyon, leaving her satisfied with the result. She says everything is going great since they're falling into the rift one after another, and she looks out over the drop, thinking to herself that this place really is a graveyard for magical beasts. Anju notices one last small monster trying to fly away from the edge, and she stands right in the middle of her massive magic circle as it starts to glow, clasping her hands. She says it was lucky to escape for a second, but she's not letting it get away now. She calls this the final touch. Her hands start glowing with a crazy amount of power, and she says no one is going to lay a finger on her people. She looks straight ahead with total focus, saying everything is safe as long as she's standing there. She calls out for the purifying light, and a massive pillar of energy shoots straight into the sky over the city. The blast is so bright that Gilberto and his squad have to cover their eyes just to keep from going blind. The stray monster gets caught in the explosion of light and starts to burn away into nothing, leaving a single beam of magic hanging in the air above the town for a long moment, until Anju finally steps back down, her job done and the area finally cleared out. Anju stands alone among the ruins as the massive magic finally fades away, closing her eyes. She says she's just glad she somehow wiped out all the demons, and now her job there is done. She grabs her suitcase, thinking that as for everything else, she'll just leave without saying a word. She thinks about how she didn't get to say a real goodbye, remembering the way Gilberto held her before. Anju tells herself this place doesn't need a saint of warding anymore, but then a voice suddenly yells her name. She freezes up and looks back with total shock in her eyes as Gilberto stands there in his tattered uniform, looking like he can't believe what he's seeing. Anju just stands there holding her bag and gives a small, quiet reply to confirm it's really her. Gilberto is completely lost, asking why she's even there and calling her name again. He demands to know what's going on and what she did, asking about her new look and that crazy light he just saw. Gilberto lets out a pained sound while Anju looks away, telling herself she has to get out of there, but he catches her, staring her down and asking who she's supposed to be with that new look. Anju starts to panic, thinking she needs to push everyone away before they find out the truth. She reminds herself that she already chose to leave her old life behind as the magic starts to swirl. The soldiers standing nearby are completely lost, watching as a dark whirlpool opens up in the middle of the ruins. Suddenly, there's a massive burst of energy that blows everything back in a cloud of dust. Gilberto grabs Anju and pulls her close to protect her from the skeletal winged demons appearing. The whole place is falling apart, and Gilberto yells her name over the sounds of people screaming. He stands there in his wrecked uniform, looking at her in total disbelief and asking who she really is. Anju just stands there holding her suitcase, looking him in the eye and telling him it's just her. Anju tries to find the words to explain herself. She starts to speak, but dark liquid begins bubbling up from the ground right at her feet. Everything starts going crazy as massive spikes of black sludge burst through the floor, catching Gilberto completely off guard while Anju watches from the back. Anju is totally stunned by what's happening, looking on with wide eyes as the ground continues to tear itself apart. Gilberto can barely process the chaos. He starts to yell out in confusion, realizing that whatever is coming out of the ground is massive. He stares straight ahead, sweat dripping down his face as he tries to make out the shape appearing in the middle of the mess, asking himself what he's even looking at. Just then, a giant rotting skeletal claw slams down onto the stone with a heavy thud. Gilberto can't believe his eyes as a massive, tattered wing unfolds right in front of him, dripping with dark fluid. It's an evil dragon straight from the den of demons. It lets out a deafening roar as it fully pulls itself out of the wreckage. The beast takes to the sky, and Gilberto realizes with a sinking feeling that the great migration of magic beasts definitely isn't over yet. Anju stares up at the monster, her expression hardening as she prepares to deal with the terrifying thing circling above them. Anju stands right in the middle of a glowing magic seal. It's huge, and she realizes the monster is actually turning into an undead. This thing was born from whatever was left of a demon, and it looks absolutely disgusting. It's basically the demon lord's final act of spite against the world, showing up as a giant eye staring out from the dark. The beast just spreads corruption and nasty curses everywhere it goes, with black sludge spiking out of the ground like it owns the place, flying through the sky to wherever it feels like while the sun sets over the kingdom. Anju watches it with a serious look in her eyes. She knows they can't just let a monster like that wander off. She starts running through the ruins, telling herself she has to take it down right here, then yells for it to come at her. As she shouts to get its attention, Gilberto panics in the background, asking what on earth she's doing, but Anju is already ready to go, calling out for her holy spear to pierce through the enemy as she launches a blast of pure light. The magic streaks across the ruins. Anju watches as her power flies toward the dragon, determined to end this fight. The dragon is moving way too fast for Anju to keep up, and she realizes she can't even land a single hit. Suddenly, the ground explodes with black spikes right under her feet, making her let out a quick scream as she looks over at Gilberto with total worry on her face. She realizes he's actually hurt and asks what he's doing, while Gilberto just grunts in pain as blood drips down his arm. Even though he's injured, he puts everything he's got into one massive swing of his heavy sword, sending the blade straight through the dragon's body in a huge spray of black liquid. But it doesn't even matter. The dragon's flesh starts bubbling and knitting itself back together immediately, showing it's totally useless since the undead dragon just regenerates, and Gilberto knows they'll need a holy sword to actually kill it. He yells for Anju to get back because it's too dangerous, but she's already looking for a way to help as the beast circles high above the ruins, ready to come back down for another attack. Gilberto is looking pretty rough as he yells out that she can't take this thing on by herself. But just then a huge burst of light hits the dragon right in the face, catching the monster completely off guard, and Furs finally shows up to the ruins, holding her arm and apologizing to the captain, Ange, and Gilbert for being late. Ange looks over with a worried face and asks if she's alright. While right behind her the rest of the squad appears on the ridge. Ange can't believe the whole team actually made it. The soldiers are all whispering and confused, wondering if that's really Ange and what she's even doing there, but Gilberto shuts them down immediately, yelling that all the explanations are going to have to wait for later. He grips his sword and tells them the battle isn't over yet, ordering everyone to support Ange and kill the dragon. The guys start jumping in and hacking at the dragon's remains, but Ange just stands there in her glowing barrier asking why they're doing this. She's looking at her friends and thinking about how she wants to save them all without anyone else getting hurt. Ange is totally overwhelmed by everything and starts shouting at everyone to just forget about her and leave her behind, but Gilberto isn't having any of it. He yells right back at her that there's no way he's ever going to leave her alone. He stands there with his huge sword ready for more, and asks her if she still hasn't realized the truth yet, leaving Ange just staring at him as he explains that he knows she was only trying to fight for their sake this whole time. The rest of the guys start swarming the dragon ruins to help out. Gilbert tells her that they're really no different from her, and Furs jumps in to say they were the ones who were saved by her before, so now it's their turn to save her instead. Gilberto lets out a massive shout, telling her straight up that she's precious to every single one of them. Then he grabs her and pulls her in close, swinging his sword to smash through the chaos and protect her from the debris. Ange's eyes go wide as the realization finally hits her. She's never had people care about her like this before. She can only whisper his name while he holds her tight, right as the entire area starts to explode around them. Ange realizes he's telling the truth, even after everything he's seen. He's still standing by her and she can't help but cry as she thanks him for wanting to save her and feeling the same way. So she reaches for her pendant, deciding that if he's really going this far for her, then she needs to step up too. She tells Gilbert she's done hesitating and that they're going to take down that dragon together. And the massive skeletal dragon let out a deafening roar while they ready themselves for the fight. Gilbert asks what the move is, since his physical hits aren't doing much and her magic is too easy to dodge. But Ange mentions she actually has one idea in mind, which catches Gilbert completely off guard. She explains it's something she's never tried before and would need his okay first. He tells her to just go for it and gives her a confident look, telling her to show him exactly what she can really do, making Ange nod and focus as she puts her hands together ready to finally let her power loose. The squad backs Ange up, shouting that they're going to give this fight everything they've got, while one of the soldiers yells out as he feels a sudden, massive surge of energy hitting him. Furs looks down at his glowing hands in total disbelief, realizing something crazy is happening as Ange shouts to the whole group that she's put anti-demon enchantments on all their gear. She tells them to forget about the dragon's curses or poison and just focus on driving it toward Gilbert. So she turns to Gilbert and tells him that she's going to give him a temporary boost right now. She explains that she's going to pour all of her holy power directly into his very being and reaches out to him, leaning in close while he just watches her, completely caught off guard. Ange pulls him into a kiss to transfer her mana, a direct move to power him up for the finale. Gilbert stands there frozen with his face turning bright red, totally stunned by what she just did. Gilbert is completely thrown off by the kiss, stammering and asking Ange what she's even doing, but he doesn't have time to process it before a massive light starts glowing all around him. He holds his sword up high, and the blade starts shining with this crazy, intense power, realizing that his weapon has been transformed into a legendary holy sword right in his hands. It's a holy greatsword that's been reborn, now carrying the power to wipe out every bit of evil. And even though it's huge, it feels light as dust while being able to kill demons in a heartbeat. Ange looks on as the power settles, knowing only the one chosen as the saint can actually grant this, which confirms her true identity to everyone there as the Saint of Warding, Lady Angelina. Later on, some messengers from the Kingdom of Centria show up and say they need to know why she left, telling her she needs to report to the royal castle first thing tomorrow morning to explain herself. The formal council is officially called to session in the Grand Hall, but back in her room, Anju is completely losing it from embarrassment. She sits there alone, stressing over the fact that everyone finally knows who she really is. The whole point of this council meeting is to look into matters of national importance and hand out a sentence. And she knows that since she ran away from her own country, she's going to be treated like a criminal, worrying about what will happen if they actually force her to go back to Centria. She stares into the mirror wondering what to do when suddenly there's a knock at the door. Anju tells whoever it is that she's coming right now, and she goes to open it, only to find Gilberto standing there looking all serious in the hallway. She gets so startled that she just slams the door shut in his face without thinking. Gilbert catches her and asks why she's even closing the door, making Anju admit that seeing him right now is just really awkward. But he just sighs and tells her she's always trying to run away. Anju looks down, barely able to find the words to explain herself as she starts to say that she feels terrible about Gilbert, Furs, and the rest of the squad. Mostly because she's been lying to all of them this whole time, standing in the middle of the huge hallway. She thinks to herself that she wouldn't even blame them if they decided she was a bad person. But Gilbert just looks at her and says he's actually there to protect her, which completely catches Anju off guard. He goes on to explain that thanks to stuff that happened 2 years ago, people in their country really hate the Saint of Warding, telling her that the people waiting at the inquiry don't even know her. They just hate her because of all the rumors they've heard. Furs jumps in too, saying the only people who should really be her allies are the ones she actually saved, which leaves Anju totally stunned. She looks up at Gilbert, who gives her a much softer look than usual and says her name, and knowing these two are actually on her side gives her the courage she needs, so Gilbert tells her it's time to get moving. Anju tells herself she's gotta do her best even though she's nervous, so she just nods and says yes, walking through the doors as someone tells her it's time to go. The council is officially starting, and the announcer yells out her name and title to the whole room, which has all these serious-looking guys in uniforms just staring her down. As she takes a step forward, people in the crowd start whispering, asking if she's really the one talking behind her back about how she supposedly left her own people to die while she walks past them. She bows down in front of the throne while someone mentions how this nation is all about being fair. But looking up at the king, Anju can't help but wonder how this strict guy is actually going to judge her. She keeps it professional and tells him it's an honor to meet the king of Robardia, The king just stares back at her while she curtsies, thinking to himself that her face looks really familiar. A heavy boot steps into the throne room, and a guy yells out that he's finally tracked down Angelina, standing there looking totally full of himself while Anju looks like she's seen a ghost, realizing it's Graham, the son of Earl Cream. Anju asks him what he's even doing there, but Graham just keeps talking, announcing that he's shown up as the official representative and her brilliant former fiancé. He starts walking toward her, talking about how she doesn't even compare to other people, suddenly losing it and screaming that she's just an incompetent, useless piece of trash, which clearly hits her pretty hard. Anju thinks back to when she told him that if they combined her power with his through the sword, they could actually win. But even as she begged him to believe in her, Graham just charged ahead with the glowing blade like he had something to prove. The memory fades as the massive skeletal dragon roars, showing off its rows of sharp teeth, and then it takes off, flying over the ruins of the city while everyone watches. Graham keeps running through the rubble, holding onto his sword as things start getting real. The soldiers on the ground are losing it. They start yelling for their captain while holding onto ropes and getting ready for whatever comes next. Something massive slams into the ground, sending a huge shockwave through the area and kicking up dust. Graham jumps straight down from the ruins, gripping his glowing sword with both hands while the skeletal dragon waits below with its mouth wide open. He's clearly pushing himself to the limit, huffing and puffing as he puts everything he's got into this one move. And he actually connects, slicing deep into the dragon's neck and sending a spray of dark fluid everywhere as he flies past. Graham lands and narrows his eyes, looking completely locked in as he watches the monster's reaction. The dragon throws its head back and roars in pain, dark liquid still pouring out of the fresh wound Graham just opened up. Gilberto watches the whole thing with a tense look on his face, while Anju just stands there, completely shocked by what she's seeing. The dragon's body suddenly erupts, sending a massive wave of that black sludge flying in every direction, and the soldiers barely have time to react, yelling out as they hide behind their magic shields while the gross liquid splashes all over them. The explosion from the dragon sends a massive wave of black sludge everywhere, forcing Anju to shield her face as it slams into her with enough force to send her flying backward through the air while debris and rocks whiz past her. She looks totally terrified, cursing under her breath as she realizes she's got no way to stop herself from crashing. Down below, Gilberto sees the whole thing and completely loses it, screaming out her name in a panic, just as a shadow blurs across the sky, moving faster than anyone can track, and Anju gasps as she's suddenly caught mid-fall, feeling the momentum shift while she's pulled into a safe landing. From the ground, a hand reaches toward the light where she's hovering, as a voice sighs about how stressful the whole thing was. Furs looks up at her with a tired smile, telling her he seriously can't take his eyes off her for even a second. Eventually, they end up lying together in a quiet field of flowers near the ruins, and Anju finally lets out a sigh of relief, whispering that she's just glad the nightmare is finally over. Gilberto just lies back in the grass, staring at the sky and thinking about how they actually won without losing a single soul. But his quiet moment gets cut short when Anju suddenly tackles him, yelling for him to wait as she tells him how glad she is he's okay. Anju starts to think the hug is getting a bit too aggressive, but Gilberto just holds on tighter, saying he's not letting go because he's afraid she'll run away again. And as they sit there, he leans in close and tells her there's no reason for her to keep hiding things anymore. He makes it clear she doesn't have to keep secrets from the squad, and Anju just looks at him and quietly agrees, while Gilberto stares her down and says her name, prompting Anju to ask who he thinks she really is deep down. She looks down at her hands, thinking that if it's for him and the rest of the guys, she might finally be able to open up. But then a voice suddenly cuts through the air, calling out for Lady Angelina. A group of strangers shows up, led by a woman in a fancy dress who says they're from the kingdom of Centria and they're there to take her back home. Anju can't believe what she's hearing as the woman calls her their holy maiden of warding, leaving her completely frozen in shock. Graham points a finger right at Anju and starts screaming, asking if she has any clue what's happened to their home because of her. He describes a total nightmare where monsters are running wild through the streets, killing innocent people and soldiers left and right. It's a mess, and he says the other maidens are completely wiped out and starting to break under the pressure. He pins the whole disaster on her, shouting that it's only happening because she ditched her job as the Holy Maiden, leaving Anju looking totally crushed while he keeps going, saying there's nothing left to talk about because the useless girl who left them to die is obviously guilty. The group from Centria grabs her arm and makes it clear they're taking her into custody to be judged as a criminal, making Anju realize this is completely wrong. Even as Graham keeps yelling about her being incompetent, she knows deep down that she actually did what she was supposed to, but she still feels the weight of it, admitting to herself that she really did run away because she just couldn't take the abuse anymore. She starts to find her voice to speak up for herself as she stands there, but before she can get a word out, Gilberto and the squad step right in front of her, blocking the path and making it clear they aren't letting anyone take her anywhere. Graham gets right in Gilberto's face, telling him he's just a lowly escort and needs to shut up and step back. But Gilberto doesn't blink. He fires back that Graham is actually the one being disrespectful and needs to back off. Graham looks completely stunned that a soldier would talk to him like that. Gilberto stands his ground, reminding the whole room that this is supposed to be a fair talk, and they can't just judge someone based on one side of the story. He argues that if they actually care about being fair, then they have to listen to what his squad has to say about Anju's time with them. The rest of the guys in the squad look on, waiting to see if the leaders will actually let them speak up. The king of Robardia just sits there with his arms crossed, watching the whole scene play out without saying a word. Gilberto takes a heavy step forward to make his official statement, telling everyone in the room that, as the leader of the squad that took her in, he's personally watched every single thing Anju has done since that day. He brings up how everyone keeps calling her a useless failure who ditched her country, and then says that might actually be the truth. Gilberto places a hand on Anju's head to calm her down, telling everyone that the Angelina he's come to know is nothing like the girl they're describing. He goes on to explain that during her time with them, she was actually very competent, and she dedicated herself completely to helping his squad. Moving on, he describes how she didn't just hide away, she stood right on the most dangerous parts of the front lines herself. He wraps up his point by saying that in the end, she's actually the one who saved the country as he stands tall next to her and yells that the brave girl he saw is the real her. He argues that there has to be some kind of explanation for why things went wrong back in Centauria, and he tells the room that if they're going to judge her, they need to wait until they've heard her side and actually know who she is. Graham starts shaking with rage. He can't believe what he's hearing and tells Gilberto not to be so ridiculous. He completely snaps and calls Gilberto a bastard, yelling that he's making it sound like Graham is the one lying about her. Graham points his finger and screams that anyone who protects a useless person is just as useless as they are. And then he asks if Gilberto really wants to be thrown in a cell and chained up right next to a piece of trash like Anju. The whole courtroom is buzzing with people whispering about the drama. Anju stands there looking pretty nervous while Gilberto stays right by her side. The king finally has enough of the noise and yells for everyone to be quiet, and the entire hall goes dead silent as he looks down from his throne, ready to get things started. He calls her out by her official title, the Holy Maiden of Exorcism, and Anju quickly replies to show she's listening. The king looks her straight in the eye and tells her she needs to be completely honest about her side of the story, so she takes a deep breath and clutches her chest, trying to find the courage to speak up. She finally finds her voice and tells the whole room that she doesn't regret leaving her country for even a second. Gilberto and Furs just stare at her. They're totally caught off guard by how bold she's being in front of the king, but Graham starts laughing like he's won something. He points at her and tells everyone that this confession proves she's actually a terrible person, shouting that her abandoning Centria like that is all the proof they need. Anju explains she's just glad she could save the people here, since they were the only ones who actually accepted her for who she is. She looks up at the king and admits she should have made this move a long time ago, because if she hadn't, she might have been able to save all their loved ones 2 years back, a thought that leaves the soldiers in the room totally speechless. Gilberto watches her closely as she confesses that even after she escaped her old life, she couldn't stop herself from lying. She tells the court that her dishonesty was strictly because she was weak, and she knows that what she did is totally unforgivable. Clenching her hands together, she continues to beat herself up for how helpless she felt back then, before dropping to her knees and bowing as low as she can, offering a formal apology to everyone as the Holy Maiden. The king stays stone-faced as he looks down at her, finally speaking up to tell her he's ready to hand out her punishment. He leans forward and announces his decision. He's sentencing the saint to be a prisoner of the state for the rest of her life. Anju is completely caught off guard by the ruling. She and Gilberto both look like they can't believe what they just heard. The king isn't finished yet and adds that there's one condition to his ruling, which sends Anju into a total spiral. She can't wrap her head around the idea of being handed over to this country, stuttering as she tries to figure out what exactly is going on. The king clarifies that because she stepped up during their national crisis, he's applying a specific law to her that guarantees her mental and physical protection, meaning she's officially being placed under protective custody. Gilberto leans in close to explain the situation, telling her this is just a formal way of saying she's going to be warmly welcomed in Robardia from now on. He looks down at her with a soft smile and tells her he's honestly just relieved things worked out. Anju looks up at him, her face turning bright red as she realizes her life is finally changing for the better. The weight of the moment finally hits her and she faceplants onto the floor, admitting she was fully prepared to be executed or exiled. Everyone around her starts laughing with relief, But over in the corner, Graham is absolutely losing it. He bites his thumb and breaks into a cold sweat, unable to believe that a saint is actually being allowed to move to another country, worrying about what happens to Helena and the kingdom, so he snaps and yells at the king. He can't stay quiet anymore and shouts that they formally protest this kind of treatment, making a scene in front of everyone. He's not backing down and demands to speak with the saint right this second, acting like he still has some kind of authority over her. Gilberto stops and looks back at him with the coldest stare imaginable, simply asking him what he thinks he's doing. Andrew just keeps walking away with Gilberto, leaving Graham standing there all by himself to deal with the fact that he completely lost her. Graham finally snaps and starts walking forward, acting like he's about to do something crazy. He's got this terrifying look in his eyes while reaching inside his coat for a hidden weapon. Ange is standing there completely frozen, but then someone yells her name to try and get her to move. Graham lunges at her with a knife, but Gilberto throws himself in the way to take the hit for her. Blood sprays right across Ange's face as she watches the person protecting her get stabbed, and the bloody dagger hits the floor with a heavy clatter as the attack ends. Furs sees the whole thing and screams for his captain in total panic, as Gilberto collapses onto the ground while everyone else in the room starts losing their minds. Ange is crying as she grabs onto Gilberto, while Furs yells for her to stay alert and asks why this is happening. Furs tells her to get back, but Ange refuses and shouts that she has to start treating his wounds immediately. The room erupts into chaos as someone screams for the guards to seize the messenger. Soldiers rush in immediately as everyone stands over the blood on the floor, while Graham starts laughing like a total maniac while being pinned down. He calls Ange a stupid woman and tells her she's not getting away. He keeps ranting that this is a deal, and if she wants to save Gilbert, she has to go to Centria. Graham yells that she's destined to be a slave there forever, while the massive city sits in the distance. Later on, word comes in that a response has arrived from the Kingdom of Centria regarding the attack. The report confirms the dagger was poisoned and admits that despite their best efforts, the captain's condition isn't getting any better. The messenger explains that in exchange for the saint's antidote, the enemy is demanding custody of Ange. Furs looks at her with concern, but Ange just stares at the floor and quietly says she'll go. She's completely made up her mind that this time, she's the one who's going to protect him. Ange looks completely set on her choice. She looks straight ahead and says she's going to the Kingdom of Centria. Everything is packed up and ready to go. The straps on the travel bag are finally buckled down, and the group stands in a massive hall where the teleportation circle is ready. Someone explains it leads straight to Centria and that the other side already has it all set up. Furs looks at her with a heavy face. He asks if she's really planning on heading into enemy territory all by herself. He calls out her name just to get her to look at him, but she stays quiet for a second, standing there in her formal dress. Ange finally looks up and says that going alone was the only demand they made. She thinks back to the moment it happened, Gilbert stepping in front of her and taking that poisoned blade just to keep her safe. Since that poison is killing him, she knows the only way he's making it out alive is if they get the saint's antidote. Graham's crazy face flashes in her mind. The only way to get that medicine is to trade her life for his, just like Centria demanded. Ange grips her hands together and looks down. She says she honestly has no clue what's going to happen to her once she gets back to that country. Ange stands by Gilbert's bedside, looking at him while he's out cold. She's terrified of what's coming, but she knows she has to keep moving forward, and Gilbert is still covered in a cold sweat. Looking pretty rough, Ange starts to reach out, wanting to touch his hand, but she stops herself. She closes her eyes, looking like she's about to cry, and just whispers a soft apology to him for everything that's happened so far. She makes a quiet promise to save him no matter what, but then she looks down, wondering if she actually has a real plan to make that happen. Later at the teleportation hall, the light is already glowing when Furs suddenly calls out and asks her to wait for just a second. He calls her by her real name, Anju, which makes her stop and turn back toward him with a surprised look on her face. Furs gets serious and tells her that since the captain is down, he's taking over the job of protecting her. He makes it clear she's not alone in this. He steps in close and promises to stay right by her side, making sure she knows he's got her back during this whole mess, and he just looks at her with this really honest expression, telling her to keep everything he just said in mind while she's gone. Ange finally relaxes a bit and gives him a genuine smile. She thanks Furs for being there for her before she finally heads out. Ange announces that she's heading out now, stepping forward and setting off for the Kingdom of Centauria while the teleportation magic flashes all around her. She opens her eyes as the light fades, taking in her new surroundings, standing right in the middle of a massive pile of rubble while the guards watch her back. The place is a total wreck, with huge stone buildings completely falling apart under the sky. Nothing but empty stone arches are left standing where the palace used to be, and jagged pieces of the old structure are just scattered across the ground like trash. Ange is completely stunned by the sight, covering her mouth as she tries to process the damage. She looks at the deep cracks in the walls, realizing that Queen Leonora's famous barrier has finally failed. She starts to panic, thinking that by the time she gets where she needs to go, there might not even be a kingdom left to save. A large jagged rock flies through the air at high speed, heading straight for Ange's head, but she flinches just in time to avoid it while the man who threw it stares her down with pure hatred. She stands there in the middle of the ruined city with her guards. Meanwhile, a villager holding a wooden pole steps up to block her path. The man looks at her with total disgust and calls her the Holy Maiden of Warding, sounding like he's about to lose it. He tells her she's finally come back, calling her an incompetent and useless piece of trash. The guy screams that everything that happened is all her fault, and then he and a young kid start throwing more rocks at her. The rest of the villagers join in, shouting that because she abandoned the country, they're stuck in this horrible mess. Another person from the crowd yells that their child was hurt because of her, while everyone gathers around to corner her. They call her a witch and say she needs to be punished, all while someone grips a stone tight in their hand. Ange is completely terrified as they tell her to face her judgment. She just stands there shaking, realizing the people she wanted to save actually want her dead. Ange flinches and throws her arm up to protect herself, but the rock flying at her face suddenly bounces off like it hit a wall. The man who threw it stops cold, looking totally confused. The crowd starts whispering, asking if the stone just deflected off thin air. Ange looks just as shocked as everyone else, but one of the villagers snaps at her to keep moving and quit trying anything funny. She just keeps her head down, walking past the ruins as her guards lead her through the city. They reach a massive, crumbling cathedral that looks like it's seen much better days. Suddenly, Ange trips and hits the pavement hard, dropping her bag as she tries to catch herself. She hears a voice say she looks pretty good considering the country is a mess, and her eyes track upward to see a man in royal robes and a fur cape standing right over her. Ange recognizes him immediately. She realizes this is the king of Centria himself standing there. Helena looks right at Ange with a mean look, and asks if she's surprised to see the Saint of Healing standing there, almost biting her own finger as she mentions how much she's changed since the last time they saw each other. She starts ranting about how everything that went wrong was because of Ange, and suddenly Helena lunges forward. Grabbing her, Helena loses it, screaming that she was insulted and called a useless loser all because of what Ange did. And she keeps going, shouting about how she was used and abandoned by everyone and even lost her lover. Helena keeps yelling that it's all Ange's fault, but the king tells her to chill out since the traitor is going to pay for it anyway. The king looks down at Ange and says it's pretty obvious his people hate her, and that it's only natural since she walked away from her duty and left the whole country open to get attacked, making her a massive sinner who needs a punishment that actually fits the crime. And then he pulls out a small bottle. Ange gets desperate and asks about the saint's antidote, telling the king she kept her promise and came alone just so he would hand it over, but the king just smirks at her and says there's no such thing as an antidote. Ange just stands there in total shock, her mind racing as she realizes she's been played. The king holds up a tiny bottle and explains it's actually a drug for enslavement, and he tells her she's the one who's going to drink it. Suddenly the guards move in and grab her arm so she can't escape, as the king keeps talking about how this medicine is for subjugation, designed to strip away a person's will and put them under total control. Helena steps up holding the bottle, telling Ange the country fell into a crisis because she had things like love and affection, so she's going to make her throw all that away, leaving behind nothing but the warding power that the kingdom actually needs from her. Helena forces the drug toward her and tells her to drink, saying she should be grateful to be alive and that she doesn't need to think, just use her power for the country. While the king watches with a nasty grin, declaring that the saint's power belongs entirely to the kingdom of Centria. The king loses his cool and yells for Helena to force the drug down Ange's throat if she has to, while Helena grabs Ange's face and calls her the worst, telling herself to just get it over with. Ange screams that the king never planned on keeping his word and she can't believe a ruler would lie like this, begging them to just let her go, but nobody is listening. Tears start falling as she panics, wondering what she's supposed to do now and calling out for Gilbert in her head as she sees a vision of him looking totally worn out, like he's barely hanging on. Just as things look hopeless, Ange's eyes snap open with a new look of realization, remembering every single time Gilbert stepped up to protect her when she was in trouble. She tells herself that this time, she's going to be the one who saves him instead of the other way around. This was the whole reason she decided to come back to this place in the first place, and she realizes she has to see this through to the very end, refusing to let herself get discouraged even with Helena's hand clamping down on her jaw. Helena thinks there's still a way to make this work, while Ange tries to force out a reply. Helena keeps a tight grip on Ange's face, yelling that she's really beyond saving at this point, but something feels off. and Helena suddenly looks totally caught off guard, asking what's even going on as Ange stares right back at her. She tells them flat out that they don't understand a single thing about being a saint. Looking down, Ange admits that while its true saints are blessed with holy power, actually using that power requires a real will to help the country and its people. She explains that a saint's own knowledge is something they just can't do without, and she tells Helena that she of all people should understand that. She warns her that using power the wrong way means she won't be able to save anyone at all. Ange looks her dead in the eye, saying that even if Helena manages to steal her power, she still won't be able to save a thing. And to make matters worse, she tells Helena that she won't even be able to save herself. Helena starts shaking, looking completely terrified as she asks what's happening to her, right as the king loses his cool, reaching out and screaming at Helena to ask what she thinks she's doing. Graham starts getting impatient, yelling at Helena to hurry things up while they all stand by the gate, and the king is right there with him, screaming for her to make them obey no matter what. Helena tries to force some liquid down Ange's throat while someone yells her name, but something suddenly clips her hand, making her scream as she drops everything in shock. Ange looks up, completely caught off guard by what just happened, right as the heavy metal gate gets absolutely trashed, flying off its hinges. The king just stands there acting annoyed as the gate hits the floor right in front of the group, and a voice from the dust says that since talking didn't work, he's going to have to get a little rough. Furs casually walks into the room over the broken gate, looking ready for a fight while the king starts panicking, demanding to know who he is. But Ange is just happy to see him and calls out his name. The king's eyes go wide as he realizes exactly who just smashed through the gate, and Furs doesn't hold back, announcing they're soldiers from Robardia, the nation that fights demons. He admits he's not quite on the level of their saint, but he still knows enough magic to stay completely hidden from them this whole time, making Ange realize he's been helping her since he promised to be by her side, even though she thought it was just a pep talk. Suddenly, a servant runs in screaming about an emergency, soldiers are swarming the temple, and the king just snaps, yelling at the guy to shut up while he tries to process the mess. He starts crying about peace treaties and international incidents, but Furs just points out that they had every right to invade the second the king's people laid a hand on them, yet he decided to wait and watch because he believed Ange had a plan of her own. Furs glares at the king and tells him he should be grateful to even be alive honestly. He's just throwing the same arrogant words the king used earlier right back in his face. And meanwhile, Anju kneels down to talk to Helena, making it clear she's not a coward like the rest of those people. She looks Helena right in the eye and suggests they make a real, legitimate deal this time around. Helena just stares back at her, looking completely stunned by the offer. Anju holds up a small bottle and explains it's a special anti-magic medicine she made herself, then tells her that with just one of these, she actually has the power to save everyone, especially the people tainted by magic, which would finally clear Helena's disgraced name. She offers to give her the medicine if Helena gives her a healing potion in exchange, and Helena just sits there, barely able to find her voice. Helena looks down, saying she can't do it because her power is useless now, but Anju isn't having it and tells her she absolutely can because she knows Helena's power is the real deal after working with her. She truly believes in what the girl can do. Helena looks stunned for a second before looking down, finally giving in. She tells Anju it's a deal and asks for a vial. The two of them reach out and hold the glowing bottle together. Helena admits she hates this side of Anju, but Anju just fires back that she feels the exact same way. The liquid inside the small bottle starts to glow and react, showing the trade is officially done, and Anju holds the medicine close, looking more determined than ever to set things right. Furs watches her for a moment before telling her to go, promising they'll handle everything down here. Anju doesn't waste a second and starts sprinting up the stone stairs. While back in the room, Furs looms over the king, who is now kneeling on the floor, looking completely broken. Furs thinks about how his royal status is usually just a huge nuisance, but maybe it's time to actually use it for Ange and the country. The king looks up, finally seeing who he's really dealing with as the realization hits him like a truck. He stammers out Furs' name, realizing the man he's been talking down to is actually the second prince of the kingdom. Furs looks down at him with zero pity, confirming it's true and reminding the king that the girl he threatened is actually his own family. Furs sits there looking totally chill, while he tells the king he's going to have to think about how to deal with him from here on out. The king is just shaking on the floor, sweating bullets as Furs leans in and tells him straight up that his country is finished. Anju is rushing through the castle looking completely panicked, her eyes wide as she pushes forward. Someone yells at her to move it because the teleportation circle to Robardia is right ahead, and they need to go now, but the villagers start losing it, reaching out and begging her not to go and to save them instead. They're all chasing after her and grabbing at her clothes, but Anju keeps running, deciding that she's the one who chooses who to save. She knows exactly who she needs to get to right now, and she screams Gilbert's name as she finally reaches the room. Gilbert is lying there totally still on the bed, looking like he's in bad shape while Anju begs him to be okay. She holds the small bottle of medicine to his lips, telling him he has to wake up while a voice asks how it even got to this point. Anju just cradles his head in her lap, looking down at him and waiting for any sign that the medicine is actually working. Someone yells for everyone to look out for the usual spot, right as a massive hole opens up in the ground. Marco lets out a sigh of relief for a second, totally missing the monster snarling and lunging right behind him. A hand reaches out towards the light. Moving slowly as if searching for something, Marco yells and shields his face as a sudden blast of energy hits, knocking him back while debris flies. The soldier with glasses is surprised by more monsters, but his buddy explains that the monster dens haven't calmed down yet. He tells him they'll be fine as long as Ange is with them, and then he tries to call out to her. Someone stops and looks up at the building, realizing something isn't right as they hold their hand up. The soldier asks if she's still hiding inside, and Marco says, yeah, mostly because there's still no word on Gilbert. Furs sits there thinking about how Ange is blaming herself, and getting depressed even though she did nothing wrong. Ange stands by the window in the big empty room, just wishing that they would both wake up and get better. Ange wakes up to find that another morning has come, but Gilbert still isn't there with her. And even though she stays by his side in the medical room, Gilbert shows no signs of waking up. The healing potions manage to handle the poison, but the wound itself is so deep that nobody knows if he's actually going to make it, leaving Ange gripping her dress in frustration, because all she really wants is to be by his side. She finds herself wishing she could just hold his hand every day and feel his warmth again, but her face quickly clouds over with worry as her thoughts take a darker turn. Standing alone in the room, she can't stop thinking about how he only got these terrible injuries because he was busy protecting her. And the guilt starts to eat at her until she's convinced it's all her fault, making her heart ache just to see him. She's curled up on the floor totally lost on what to do, but then a sudden knock at the door breaks the silence, as a voice from out in the hallway calls for her and asks if she has a moment to talk. Furs gives her a warm look and asks if she'd like to go grab some tea, mentioning that he actually has something important he needs to talk to her about. They head out, and Anju is completely blown away by the view, telling him how lovely the Philanium Gardens look today. Furs asks if she likes the spot, explaining that it's actually one of the most famous sweet shops in all of Lombardia, and the view from the terrace is usually pretty amazing. As he helps her into her seat, he mentions that the place is a bit of a hidden gem, so even the royal family ends up coming here a lot. Anju goes quiet for a second, just thinking about the fact that the royal family visits this place, while Furs just stands there with a really calm and friendly smile on his face. A fancy strawberry cake roll gets served to the table, but Anju seems a little hesitant to start eating, and then Furs shifts the mood, bringing up the topic he wanted to discuss earlier. Anju's heart sinks immediately because she's terrified of what he might say. She starts spiraling, wondering if something terrible happened to Gilbert while she wasn't looking, and as her hand starts shaking and gripping her dress in fear, Furs gently calls her name to bring her back to reality. Furs tries to lighten the mood by mentioning how great the cake is at this shop. Anju is just sitting there completely lost because of the sudden change in the conversation. He doesn't stop there though, and holds out a forkful of cake, telling her to open up and take a bite while she just blushes and stares at him. She actually goes for it and takes the bite, and as she starts chewing, she's clearly overwhelmed by how bold he's being. Furs just leans on his hand with a relaxed smile, watching her eat, and then asks if she thinks the cake is as good as he said it was. Anju lights up immediately, saying the cake is super sweet and delicious, which makes Furs feel a lot better knowing he successfully distracted her. He tells her that she finally looks relaxed, adding that a smile really is the best look for her, and that compliment has her freezing up mid-bite. Realizing the whole trip was just a way to make her feel better, Anju looks down at her tea and gives him a soft thank you while he just keeps smiling. But then, the mood shifts as Furs says they have serious stuff to get through, starting with the fact that the Kingdom of Centria is being totally dismantled. He explains how the neighboring countries are going to carve up the land and take it over, and that all the citizens are basically being kicked out. As he wraps up the update, he mentions that Helena has been officially taken under their country's protection, which finally settles what's happening to her former home. Furs mentions that this whole situation with the kingdom must be complicated for Anju, but she just says it's fine. Since she was used by her own country in the past, she explains that she just wants those other girls to find happiness and hearing that makes Furs look at her with a soft expression, telling her she's way too kind. He mentions he personally wants her under his protection, but admits that the official call on what happens to her hasn't been made. Anju looks down, saying that nothing can really be settled until they know for sure that Gilbert is safe. She goes quiet after that, just staring at the table while Furs watches her from across the way. He just gives her a small smile, clearly having something else on his mind as the mood gets heavy. Furs asks if she wants to see the major, and when she says she isn't in a position to want that, he asks if he isn't enough to take his place. The question completely shocks her, and she just stares at him like she can't believe what he's implying. Suddenly, Furs reaches over and takes her hand in his, looking her right in the eye and telling her that he loves her. Furs doesn't hold back, telling Anju that regardless of her status, he loves her strength, her weakness, and every little thing that makes her who she is. He looks her right in the eyes, asking if she could ever find it in her heart to accept the love he's offering her. He makes it clear that he isn't just looking at a saint, he's in love with the woman named Angelina. But Anju is clearly shaken by the confession, her voice trembling as she starts to say that she feels the same way about having feelings. The air between them gets heavy while she tries to find the right words to explain herself. Clutching at her chest, she realizes she has to be honest about where her heart actually lies, even if it hurts. She looks at him with tears in her eyes and tells Furs she's sorry, but she just can't return those feelings. The dam finally breaks and she starts sobbing, crying out that the only person she really wants to see right now is Gilbert. She's completely heartbroken, repeating over and over how much she just wants to be with him again. After she says her piece, she apologizes again, leaving Furs sitting there in silence as the weight of the rejection sinks in. Furs takes the hit with a sad smile, and Anju can only say she's sorry before things get awkward, but Furs just shrugs it off with a comment about how people talk. When suddenly Anju hears a voice asking how she's been holding up, and a heavy boot steps into the room. Anju spins around, her eyes wide and starting to fill with tears because she can't believe the person standing there is actually him, and he just gives her this soft, relieved smile. Gilbert looks at her and says he really wanted to see her too, which makes Anju completely freeze up for a second seeing him standing there at the door looking totally fine. The shock wears off and she just screams his name, the tears finally starting to flow as she launches herself at him, wrapping her arms around him in a massive hug. But she's a little too excited, and Gilbert starts yelling in pain, so she has to back off and apologize for almost breaking him. Anju looks completely stunned with tears in her eyes, asking when on earth he actually woke up. Gilbert gives her a little smirk and admits he actually regained consciousness a while ago, but the doctor wanted him monitored for a few days. He adds that he really just wanted to see her true feelings, which makes Anju freak out and apologize for having so many secrets. Gilbert just says good grief, and suddenly Anju lets out a little yelp because Gilbert scoops her up in a bridal carry, telling her it's time for an interrogation and she's going to tell them everything. Anju's face turns bright red as she tells him to wait, but Gilbert just starts walking away with her while someone yells at them for being so sneaky and cruel. Anju shouts for them not to forget this as she's carried off, making Furs laugh and think those words really suit her. Furs watches them go, his expression turning a little more thoughtful and serious as he takes his fork and cuts into a slice of cake. Looking up at the birds in the sky, he thinks about how everything is sweet, but definitely a little bittersweet too. Gilbert carries Anju through the quiet garden, both of them breathing a bit heavy from the walk, but eventually he has to stop and lean over, laughing as he admits this is way tougher than he thought it'd be. Anju gets worried and tells him not to push himself, since it'd be a disaster if his wounds opened back up. Moving on, Gilbert reaches out and takes her hand, holding it firmly between both of his. He looks her right in the eyes and finally says it, telling Anj that he loves her. Anju is completely stunned, but before she can even process it, he asks her to please tell him how she really feels. She looks down, whispering his name and admitting she just can't hold back what's in her heart anymore, so standing there among the flowers, she tells him that she likes him and that he's the only one she'll ever love.